Hi there, I'm Dr. Finn Williams from Parent Perspectives, and what you're about to hear is my chat with Andy Puddicombe from Headspace. Now, this was cross-Atlantic, so what you'll hear is my questions and Andy's responses. Mine were recorded somewhere in my kitchen in Devon, and Andy's were in a sound booth in LA. So the pleasure of modern technology allows us to bring you an interview between two different continents. So, Andy, for our listeners, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name's Andy Puddicombe, and I'm the co-founder of Headspace.
So, Andy, what inspired you to start Headspace?
So Headspace began probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. And the idea came about, I was actually, I'm a former Buddhist monk. I started meditation when I was really quite young. I learned with my mum when I was about 11 years old. And later on in my early 20s, I was inspired to sort of go away and study, I guess, a bit more kind of seriously. And spent probably 10 years or so kind of really devoting my time and my life to that. And I saw so many benefits, and so many benefits that applied not just to a kind of a monastic life, but to everyday life. Because kind of mind is mind. It doesn't matter whether we're living in a monastery in a mountaintop somewhere or if we're kind of surrounded by family and children kind of living in a busy city. Mind is mind, and we need to kind of know, we need to have tools to be able to stress less or focus more or sleep better or to have better relationships with the people around us. So when I came back from being a monk, I was really I felt really sort of passionate about trying to demystify meditation, to make it more accessible and relevant to modern day living. And I was fortunate enough to meet someone now who's a very good friend. He's the co-founder of Headspace, Rich Pearson. And he really kind of understood how to translate those teachings from something, very sort of authentic and traditional into a modern day sort of take, if you like. So we've worked together now over 5 years or so. We've now got well over 1 million users on the Headspace platform, with about 60% of those using the tools every sort of 1 to 3 days.
And for our listeners, could you tell us a little bit more about what mindfulness is?
Mindfulness is all about kind of being present in the here and now with an open mind, which is non-judgmental. It sounds like quite a mouthful, I know, but it's really just about kind of being present right now. And when we do that, and we do that with, it's kind of really genuine, we lose all the critical aspects of mind, whether the criticism is aimed at ourselves or at others. Now, we can be mindful in any situation in life. We have the potential to be mindful. And most people have already experienced it. Maybe watching your children play, maybe it's watching a sunset, listening to a piece of music. Those moments where just everything else sort of disappears and we're just left with that sense of being completely engaged with what's happening right now. The only problem is that feeling tends to kind of come and go. So we need to find a way of training the mind to be more familiar with what it means to be present, and therefore spending more time in the present moment. So we need an exercise for that, and that exercise is called meditation. So in meditation, we actually kind of take a little bit of time away. It can be as little as sort of just 5 or 10 minutes, where we step away from everyday kind of activities of life. We close our eyes and we actually train the mind to be more comfortable, more familiar with being present. And over time, that starts to feed back into our everyday life, into mindfulness in everyday life, so that we can be present no matter what we're doing, whether it's walking down the street, eating our lunch, collecting the kids from school, anything at all. There's a fundamental change that takes place when those two things are practiced together.
So, Andy, for some people who might find mindfulness and meditation a little bit too alternative, could you tell us a little more about the significant research evidence on mindfulness for stress, anxiety, and depression?
Sure. So the scientific research which is going on around mindfulness, especially the neuroscience, is really quite extraordinary. Like, until maybe, 15, 20 years ago, it was thought that the mind, or the brain rather, would grow to its sort of adult size and that would kind of be it. It was kind of fixed then, and that over time, as we get older, it would simply degenerate. But what's been discovered since then, largely down to the innovation in health technology, especially fMRI machines, that allow us to actually look inside the brain before, during, and after meditation. We see that actually the brain is not fixed, it's plastic. So neuroscientists talk about it as neuroplasticity, that we can actually train the brain to change. So in the same way as when we go to the gym and we kind of work a particular muscle and it gets thicker and stronger, when we meditate, when we practice mindfulness, the brain, the cortex that's responsible for feelings of happiness and well-being, that actually gets thicker and stronger. It receives more blood flow, and therefore we experience a greater sense of happiness, a greater sense of well-being. There are very similar processes taking place in other parts of the brain as well, so that we become slightly less reactive, so that we tend to become more empathetic, so that the feeling of craving or compulsiveness tends to relinquish itself a little bit. So lots of different things coming on, and to say the explosion in research and science around mindfulness, I think there's been an increase in the number of papers published on it. I think it's an increase of 500% in the last 3 years. There's now close to 5,000 peer-reviewed published papers on the benefits of meditation and mindfulness. And some of that's really kind of quite overwhelming. A lot of it is around stress, anxiety, and depression. And it's now very clear, even when we look at sort of meta-analysis, where we take all of those different kind of research studies and we look at them sort of as an overview, if you like, we start to see that for people who practice meditation or mindfulness on a regular basis, they tend to experience less stress in life. They tend to experience a reduction in anxiety, often up to kind of 80, as high as kind of 80% reduction in anxiety. One of the more well-known or published kind of benefits of mindfulness is depression, as in the loosening or a reduction in the feelings of depression, especially around the relapse of depression. In fact, the research was so compelling that probably about 8 or 9 years ago now, the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, NICE in the UK, actually approved the use of mindfulness within private and public healthcare. So you can actually kind of go to your doctor, and when they prescribe you a sort of antidepressant medication, you can actually say, okay, I'm willing to look at that, but actually I'd also like to kind of have a look at mindfulness as well. And they can actually prescribe mindfulness. It's been shown to be as effective, in some cases, more effective than the medication route. So some really fascinating science around mindfulness.
Great. Thanks, Andy. That's really helpful. So we hear on the grapevine that you're developing a kids' mindfulness. Now, that's fantastic. So could you tell us a little bit more about how mindfulness helps kids?
So, yeah, it's true. Headspace for kids is already in the pipeline. It's already in development. It's something we've been looking at for several years, actually, trying to work out the very best way to do it. We already know that we have a lot of Headspace users who do their daily Headspace with their kids. And we know there are kids as young as 4 or 5 doing Take 10 and experiencing the benefits. It doesn't work for all children of that age, but one of my all-time favourite quotes at Headspace comes from a 5-year-old child, and she was asked kind of, how do you feel after finishing Take 10? And she said, my mind feels soft. And I think that's such a beautiful way of describing the benefits of meditation. It's so easy to get lost in the technicalities, the science of it all. But actually, it's about having a softer mind, a calmer mind, a mind which isn't so distracted. There's a trend, especially here in America where I'm living at the moment. There's a real trend for any children who are kind of quite active just to prescribe them medication as though that's the answer. And maybe in some very serious cases, that is the appropriate response. But I think for many children, it's actually just learning tools of how to calm down when it's appropriate to, how to settle the mind, how to be focused when it's appropriate, how to concentrate. And these are life skills. We're taught so many different things at school and as we're growing up, but nobody ever kind of really teaches those essential skills. It's just assumed that we're going to be patient and happy and focused and not distracted and present all the time. But the truth is the mind needs training. So if we can deliver mindfulness tools that help give children and parents by association the ability to be more present, to be happier and healthier, then we think that's just an amazing thing to be involved in.
Thanks, Andy. Now, as a clinical psychologist, I believe making mindfulness more accessible is great. But some of my colleagues, though, feel as though having mindfulness as an app translates it into an efficiency or a commodity that goes against the ethos of mindfulness. What would you say?
Well, first of all, I would say that mindfulness in no way ever suggests that change is a bad thing. In fact, mindfulness asks us to accept and integrate change and impermanence into our life. It asks us to embrace evolution and the way things change. So it's really kind of easy, I think, for clinicians to think, to hold on to the idea that these techniques need to be delivered kind of one-to-one in a therapeutic context. But that's not really the case, I would say. And it's never been the case in the existence of mindfulness. It's been around for sort of 2,500 years, maybe a little bit more, long before kind of modern day sort of therapy or clinical applications kind of came into being. So I'm really keen to kind of maintain the original essence, motivation and intention, authenticity of mindfulness, and look at it from in a sort of a broader context. Essentially, there's kind of prevention, there's management and treatment. And I'm interested in prevention. Once it gets to the point of a clinician working with someone, of course, it's more appropriate to have them working one-to-one or in a small group for the management and treatment of specific issues. That's absolutely appropriate. It doesn't mean it can't be supported by an app. But if you look at the drop-off rate, when people don't use an app, actually, most people really struggle to do their meditation homework, so to speak. And there's a massive, massive drop-off. But when you look at engagement rates with the app, we're talking over 60% using it every 1 to 3 days. That's really, really high. And it means that it can not only support the management and treatment of particular or specific symptoms, but more importantly, we can start to use it as a prevention. How can we help people stay healthy and happy? We're talking about most of the population here. Most of the population aren't going for clinical treatment. Most of the people just want to kind of learn how to stress a little bit less, how to sleep a little bit better, how to have happier, healthier relationships. So I think that's the focal point. And I can't imagine anybody who practices mindfulness, never mind actually kind of working in that environment, ever wanting to resist the potential for improving the health and happiness of others. As for the second part, whether there seems to be like an implication that somehow by using an app or putting it on the phone, there's sort of some sort of paradox with the essence of mindfulness. I think that's a bit of an illusion. The phone is a phone. It's an inert thing. Like our relationship with the phone is what's important. So the phone is neither good nor bad. Like it's what we think of it and our relationship with it. Personally, I look at the phone and the possibility of having apps on the phone as an incredible vehicle for delivering authentic, beneficial teachings at scale. The truth is, most people live with their phone, their mobile in their hand. They're checking it on a regular basis. So why not meet those people where they are rather than kind of resisting that in some way? Of course, phones have the potential to be really distracting and even destructive in our relationships. But if we can find a skillful way of working with them, then they offer a really powerful delivery mechanism.
Thanks, Andy. So I often have people say to me, I can't do it. Every time I try, my head just gets filled with thoughts about everything I need to do and how I'm wasting my time. Is there anything you can suggest to help our parents get past this?
So this idea of needing to clear the mind and get rid of thoughts, and somehow we're doing it wrong if we experience thoughts, is probably one of the biggest misconceptions about meditation. And it's one of the biggest obstacles. It's the thing that prevents people from trying it and prevents people from continuing to do it and experiencing the benefits. So meditation, just to be clear, it's not about getting rid of thoughts. It's not about getting rid of feelings. It's about learning to be present in the here and now, comfortable with the mind exactly as it is. Sometimes the mind will be busy, but we can learn to be okay with that, not reacting to it. Sometimes the mind might be very quiet, and it'll be very pleasurable, very enjoyable, and that's okay, but we don't get addicted to it. We don't kind of chase after it or try to hold on to it. Essentially, we start to let go. We're okay with things as they are. And that's what real freedom is. There's no real freedom in stepping out of life for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, experiencing a bubble of quiet and joy, and then the rest of life being absolutely crazy and the mind being all over the place. We have to find a way of training the mind so that we can be comfortable wherever we are, whatever's going on, whatever situation is happening, and however our mind is kind of manifesting in that moment. The analogy that I tend to use kind of for this is, to begin with, when we're learning meditation, it's a little bit like sitting on the side of the road. And to begin with, it's as though we're kind of wearing a blindfold and we hear all this kind of movement in the background, but we don't really know what it is. So we're quite kind of stressed out by it. That's like all the background kind of thoughts in our mind. And over time, as we start to learn meditation, it's a bit like peeling the blindfold off. And all of a sudden, we see all these cars going backwards and forwards. And those are our thoughts. And at first, it can even be quite shocking. And it's like, wow, I never knew I had so many thoughts. Maybe even we think, wow, this meditation is actually kind of making me think all the time. It's not. It's just showing us what is there and what has always been there. But then over time, as we sit there, the volume of traffic on the road starts to decrease. Every now and again, for sure, we get distracted. We're chasing after the nice-looking cars, and we're kind of trying to resist the other ones. That's normal to get caught up in that kind of thinking. But over time, again, we give up those habits of chasing the nice-looking thoughts and of resisting or trying to suppress the more challenging thoughts, and we get comfortable just sitting there, allowing the thoughts to come and go, allowing the traffic to come and go, until eventually we start to experience a very kind of calm mind. We may even experience a road with no cars on it at all for a very short period of time. But it's a process. It's a process of learning. It's a journey of a lifetime, and we definitely don't need to begin with the added pressure or expectation of wanting to clear the mind.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, guys, so we've heard from Andy everything, fantastic explanations about the place of mindfulness and meditation to help us with our mindfulness along the way. I think when I reflect about mindfulness with parenting, it's very much about how do we stay in our present moment with our children so that we can be able to hear the space that they're in, so we can literally understand what they're experiencing in order to respond well to them. I often think that when we're not very mindful in a space, we can react to children's behaviour based on whatever's in our own thoughts and feelings at the time. And when we're able to be more present with our children in the moment, we get a different opportunity to really respond to where they're coming from, to understand what led up to them, that breakdown in communication, or what led up to their distress. I think it helps us to be able to take a step towards our children rather than away. So, Andy, thank you so much. And I hope you enjoyed the podcast.